If you're watching this video, it's a good chance that you're a photographer. And that means that out of all the sandboxes of creativity that you could have chosen, you've chosen the photography sandbox. But think back to your childhood and the ways that you expressed yourself. When I go back, I think about how I used to love to write poems and short stories. I loved anything that had lots of color. So, of course, coloring books, paint by numbers. I loved my Etch-a-Sketch, even though that was black and white. I had a light bright that, you could put all the little light bulbs in to make some sort of picture. Spirographs. How I loved those. And I used to have plastic grids. I think they were like 4x4, and they had all the little, squares that you could take a needle and yarn and do basically a child's version of cross stitch. I think I went through a popsicle stick phase, and I'm sure I went through making pot holders out of those stretchy yarn, not yarn, but they were just sort of cotton stretchy loops of cloth. And I remember one of my very first creative memories was I think I was in kindergarten, so I was probably about 4 or 5 years old at the most. And we had those big pieces of paper where it was divided, and down below you had like the really thick lines where you could write your story, and then up above it was blank where you could draw a picture to go with your story. And I was writing something about snow, and I remember very well, I was lying on the floor and I had my pencil and I was pounding on the paper to make my snowflakes. And the teacher came over to me and said, "Shh, can you make your snowflakes a little softer?" And I remember, because I was a rather shy and introverted child, being very embarrassed by that. And I think it's one reason that's stuck with me so, however many decades later. But that didn't stop me, and I'm still an introvert, but I do try to make some noise occasionally. Before most of us picked up a camera, my story is not unique. Before most of us picked up our camera, we were expressing ourselves in probably hundreds of different ways. But once we kind of picked a lane and decided to be as good as we can be with our photography, it could be easy to let our curiosity and our sense of play to kind of fall by the wayside. We might express that through our photography, and I know a lot of you do. You might be into ICM or multiple exposure or doing abstracts, but we're still kind of in that photography lane. And it feels like there's a lot of opportunities to kind of go on some detours in order to bring ourselves more inspiration and more energy when we pick up our cameras. So you might be wondering why I titled this video, "I'm Having an Affair." First, I wanted to kind of push the YouTube algorithms, because why not? Have to play the game. But really more, there is some sincerity to it. I have some new loves, and I'm having so much fun with them. I almost feel like I'm cheating on my camera. But the cheating is worth it, because I believe creativity cross-training is vitally important to our growth as artists. That means putting down the camera and picking up something new. And that something new might teach us something that can be applied to our photography, or it might not. That's really not the point. The point is to reignite our curiosity, our sense of wonder, our beginner's mind, so that we can remember what it's like to learn something new and to explore and to make a mess of it and to have breakthroughs where we feel like, oh, I've reached another level of competence with whatever it is that I'm doing. And if we come away with something that helps us to be better photographers, that's a bonus. So the two loves that I've been having that affair with are cyanotypes and alcohol ink. And just in the spirit of not assuming that everybody knows what those two art forms are, I'll just do a quick explanation. Cyanotypes are an early form of photography. I want to say 1842 or so was when they first started showing up. You recognize them when you see the Prussian blue and white images. They were originally to capture botanical objects, so leaves and sprigs and flowers and whatnot. So it's a very early cameraless form of photography where you have you create an emulsion from a couple of chemicals, you spread it on just about any surface, but watercolor paper is pretty common. Some people use rocks or fabric. You can experiment with different things. You spread that on, you place your object on top of it, like let's say you're going to do a leaf. So you would put that leaf on top of it, you would put a piece of glass, clamp it down, put it out in the sun. And out in the sun is where the chemical reaction happens to sort of turn that emulsion into something that will turn blue when you put it into water. So that's just a quick explanation of that. And you can be all sorts of creative with that particular art form. And then alcohol inks are not photography at all. They're not photography at all. Sorry about my dog upstairs. Somebody must be walking by. Anyway, alcohol inks are, like I said, not photography. They are alcohol-based inks that when you put them on a non-porous surface, such as synthetic paper or ceramic tile, and then you add alcohol to them, it dilutes them further and you can manipulate them, usually with air. Some people will blow through a straw. I use my rocket lens cleaner to move them around, a blow dryer, a heat gun. There are all sorts of different ways, but basically you're kind of painting with air. And I've loved that look for many years now. And there's one artist in particular that I've followed, and I've always wanted to try it. So just this past weekend, actually, I decided I'm going to get the supplies, and as soon as I have a chance, I'm going to give it a try. So I am 24 hours into my alcohol ink journey, and I am completely infatuated with them. My dining room table has been taken over by ceramic tiles full of beautiful colors and shapes. Now, I started to make a video that was going to share with you all of the lessons that I have learned so far from having fun with these two art forms. Video was too long, it was too much information, and this topic is too important to really try to cram into one video. So consider this part one of a series of videos that I plan to do on creativity cross-training. And I want to share the thing that I'm most excited about, that I'm having the most fun with, that I think we can all learn from. And I'm borrowing this from Cole Thompson. And as soon as you hear his name, you might think black and white, and you might think photography celibacy. I'm borrowing this photography celibacy and applying it to artistic celibacy. In learning something new, of course, I have been exposed and seen some cyanotypes. I have seen alcohol ink art, but I haven't really consumed a lot of it. The opportunity in learning something new is to focus first on the fundamentals, not to go all the way to what are the professionals doing, what are the experts, what are the people producing that have been doing this for decades. Because as soon as I start doing that, I start setting up expectations of what's possible, what I'm capable of. I start expecting that as soon as I sit down and I just kind of manipulate a few things here and there, I'm going to create something amazing. And we know it doesn't work that way. Think back to the first photographs that you ever took. They were probably, mediocre. At the time, you thought they were amazing. But now, as you've grown in your skill, you see them very differently, and you see them as where you were learning some of those basics and fundamentals. And that's the opportunity here. When we detach ourselves from trying to consume as much visual information as possible, we allow ourselves to detach ourselves from comparison and contrasting what I'm doing and what they're doing. And I know this is a quote I've shared on this channel before. The reason we suffer from insecurity is because we compare our behind the scenes to everyone else's highlight reel. In learning something new, I want to stay in the behind the scenes. I don't want to see everybody else's highlight reel quite yet. I just want to focus on learning, and I want to focus on noticing, what do I like? This really came up when I was watching a tutorial, and that's really the only thing I'm allowing myself to do, is watch basic tutorials that talk about the tools and techniques, not necessarily about making specific types of art. And one of the tutorials I was watching just last night, the gentleman that was doing it, this was an alcohol ink tutorial, and he was talking about how he doesn't like fingers. So when the ink sort of spreads out in these tendrils or tentacles, and so he manipulates them, uses more alcohol to diffuse them, and makes them more wispy. And so that was just his personal preference. Well, I found this morning, when I had a chance to sit down and start playing a little bit, when I was, puffing my air and using my hairdryer, and I noticed those fingers, and I thought they looked kind of cool. But then I said, oh, wait a minute, that guy didn't like fingers. He said that he liked to make them wispy. He has a lot more experience than I do. Maybe he knows something I don't know. Maybe it's not cool to have fingers. Maybe that's the sign of an amateur. And so I dipped some alcohol on it and I smoothed them out to make some wisps. So you can see that I was already, because of getting that input from someone else about their preferences, I was starting to self-censor. And once I realized it, I, said, okay, here we go. Let's let that, release that judgment, release that standard, and just do what I want to do. Keep the fingers if I like them. Be wispy, have a straight line, have the color fill the entire tile, even if somebody else says, oh, you need white space because you need a place for the eye to rest. Well, that's, there is something in that. But if I'm really happy filling the entire frame, then I'm going to do that. And the benefit of doing this is, one of the biggest ones is that I get to see what it is that I like, what my preferences are, what makes me happy, without layering other people's judgment on top of that. And that is a huge gift. In terms of photography and practicing celibacy there, in some ways that ship has sailed. I've already consumed a lot of photography, but I'm guessing if I were to talk to Cole, and sometime I should on this podcast, he would tell me that it's never too late, that one can always take an intentional break with the idea that we are focusing inward on our own images, to use John Barclay's expression, to notice what makes my heart sing, and to trust that and feel grounded in that, instead of comparing myself to everyone else. Here's the bottom line invitation for this part 1 video. If you have time this week, think about something that you used to like to do as a child, and carve out a little bit of time to either go get the supplies, or if you have the supplies, to sit down and just do it. It might be just grabbing a pen and paper and doodling. I remember I used to doodle basically dahlias or zinnias all over my homework. And it's interesting to think about that now, because that was the very first thing that I pointed my camera at that got me really excited. So take some time to just doodle and notice what it feels like, especially to get away from the screen. But what are you drawn to as you draw? Maybe take one of your favorite images and write a poem or write a very short, like 25 to 50 word narrative that talks about that photo, that tells a little story about it. And bonus points if it's an abstract photo. Pick up some watercolor paper, the chemicals to make cyanotypes, go outside, grab a few leaves, give that a try. If you've got kids, go grab their markers or watercolors or crayons and just draw and see what comes up. It doesn't have to take a lot of supplies. You don't have to spend a lot of money. It doesn't need to take a lot of time. But the idea is to just practice working a different muscle. And as you're doing these things, don't do any homework beforehand. Don't be like, ooh, you know, how can I use crayons and shading? Or how can I, you know, what kind of things can I use for cyanotype? When all you really need to know is that it's something very flat and something that will block sunlight. Don't go read descriptions on photos. Just do it. Just do whatever comes to you. And I'd love to know what comes up for you if you want to share in the comments, or if you've had this kind of experience before, if you practice photographic celibacy or artistic celibacy, or if you've thought about it, please share your experiences. And if you enjoy this video, I invite you to like it and share it, and please do subscribe so that you're notified of future episodes. I've got some really awesome interviews coming up, and there's already a nice little library of interviews that you can catch up on if you've missed any. As always, I am very grateful to naturephotographyclasses.com and their Inspired Creator Grant for partially making this channel possible. You can learn more and submit your own application at naturephotographyclasses.com/inspired-creator. And the link to that is below in the description. I hope you've enjoyed this little diversion from talking strictly about photography, and that you're going to take up the challenge of trying something new this week. And as whatever you choose to do, don't be tempted by going out and looking to see how other people do it. Just trust your own creative intuition and your own aesthetic, and just let it be what it's going to be, because that's really what it's about. It's about imagination. It's about tapping back into the creative and you know, free-flowing imagination that we used to have as kids. And I really hope you take some time to do that this week. So thanks so much for joining me. Thanks for spending this time, and I'll see you next time.